Discoverers by Henry Slesar. This story only ever appeared in the April 1961 issue of Fantastic Stories of Imagination magazine. Read by Darrell T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. Discoverers. March 19th. Tourist trip. Next time you're in Pakistan, stay at the Dean's Hotel in Peshawar. I arrived here yesterday afternoon at the invitation of Dr. Marston Baylor and was promptly shown a suite of rooms with 2 baths and an enormous fireplace, a typical accommodation. After 4 months in the desert, a little luxury wasn't unwelcome, and neither was a little brandy. This was dispensed by a giant Pathan at the bar downstairs. The Pathans, of course, being Muslims, wouldn't touch the filthy stuff themselves, but they served it cheerfully enough. By the time Dr. Baylor arrived, I was pretty cheerful myself. He looked no different than my memory of him when he walked into the lofty old club of the hotel. He had the same jaunty, slightly bandy-legged walk, the same round, ruddy face. There was a stranger with him. A lean, muscular man with fair skin and yellow hair. Dr. Baylor introduced him as Warner Cook Yarborough, a fellow gravedigger. He gave me a brisk handshake, a clipped British greeting, and we settled into a corner of the club and got down to business. "Understand you've been working in the Punjab," Dr. Baylor said, "with the McMorris party." His eyes glowed with curiosity, and I satisfied it by relating the failure of the search. He took no pleasure in learning of it. There was no envy in the doctor. "How would you like another assignment?" he said. "Something a little different." I couldn't help smiling. "They're always different, but I'm willing to listen." "Have you ever heard of the Cave of Kashur?" "Only vaguely." "It's more legend than anything else," Cook Yarborough said dryly. "It's supposed to be somewhere in the foothills of the Hindu Kush Mountains. Afghan storytellers have filled it full of hobgoblins." "I've heard of Kara Kamar," I said. "The Black Belly. Some fine discoveries there." "Kara Kamar isn't in the same league," Dr. Baylor said with a chuckle. "Not if our information is correct. There was a preliminary dig early this year by Dr. Samish, but his party was unable to break through to the interior. However, we've examined the site and believe there's another entrance. It's our belief that the Cave of Kashur is no ordinary cave. We think it's a cavern." "An enormous cavern," the blond man said with a hint of guarded enthusiasm. "Something on the order of Carlsbad, a subterranean cavern of incredible size." "Now, wait a minute," I said. "Spelunking isn't exactly in my line. You know me, Doctor. I've always preferred the fresh air." Dr. Baylor smiled engagingly. "So have I. But for a really unique discovery, Todd, it shouldn't matter, should it? How fine a discovery do you expect?" The doctor looked at the Englishman, who flushed. "It seems to us that the limestone formations have formed caves that would have been inhabited by hunters of the Pleistocene era, and if it really is a cave system, it might well have housed thousands of them, a veritable community. We've had carbon-14 dating on some charcoal samples," the doctor said. "It looks highly encouraging, and it's all virgin territory, Todd. A candy store full of archaeological goodies. We've already lined up a party of 5, but we need a good foreman. That is your specialty, isn't it?" I ordered another brandy. Half an hour later, we shook hands, and I became a member of the Kashur expedition. March 26th. It's been less than a week since the formation of our party, and the quarrels have started already. It's the penalty of having everything run so smoothly. A few difficulties might have unified us. We left Peshawar on the morning of the 21st in a stock car and 2 jeeps bound for Kabul. We made the Khyber Pass in a few hours, and the Pakistani border guards passed us through without even a glance at our baggage. Then we were on the mountain paths, climbing 6,000 feet into breathtaking scenery, the snows frosting the peaks of the Hindu Kush, the valleys in a patchwork of emerald green. We made Kabul just before dark. Dr. Baylor had anticipated bureaucratic slowdowns, but we were received with warm friendliness at the American Embassy and even told where we could get our hands on a supply of precious gasoline. All in all, the expedition was running into too damn much good luck. There had to be a change. There was. On the second day in Kabul, I learned that 2 of the men Dr. Baylor had hired, members of the Durrani clan, were mortal enemies, even though they had never met before. Their family vendetta went back a century. Another Afghan quit the expedition after a quarrel with Cook Yarborough over some missing equipment. Then, just to make it perfect, Dr. Baylor and the Englishman had a few hot words of their own, developing out of a calm discussion of their favorite topic. I didn't hear the argument, but Dr. Baylor described it to me later. "These amateur diggers," he sneered. "It's an adventure to them, and that's all. They want to be Columbuses. They don't care a fig about serving science. They just want to find Noah's Ark or the missing link and be rich and famous for it." I rubbed my jaw and said nothing. If that was Cook Yarborough's attitude, I couldn't criticize it. It was pretty much my own. As a boy, I dreamed of unearthing Pharaoh's tomb, of discovering the remains of Atlantis, of finding treasure coves in the remnants of biblical cities. If I'd been born an earlier generation, I would have wanted to be an explorer. If I'd been born later, I would have wanted to probe the mystery of space. Neither was available to me, so I had chosen to discover the past. Not to serve science, but to serve my own ego. Even as Dr. Baylor talked, I was secretly pleased to find that I had a soulmate in my thin-lipped British colleague. Later, Dr. Baylor and Cook Yarborough have made it up, if grudgingly. It's just as well. There are days of work ahead of us before we can make the trip north to the limestone country. April 7th. We have found our cave at last, and will soon know if it was worth our difficulties. 2 days ago, our stock car broke down on the Shibar Pass and had to be abandoned along with its driver. I did the wise thing by leaving one of the feuding Durranis behind to break up any possible throat-cutting later on, but our party has been reduced to 6, and the work ahead could well require a dozen. The entrance to the Cave of Kashar was located at Mountain Goat Height, a great cavity in the face of the steep white rock. We left the jeeps below and ascended in single file. From the distance, the mouth of the cave had yawned widely, but as we approached, we discovered that the roof had collapsed, leaving us several tons of limestone to dig out before we could make our entrance. It's taken us until this morning to clear the way, and after breakfast, Dr. Baylor, Cook Yarborough, and myself will take the first step inside. Later. The first trench has proved to be barren. Work has begun on the second trench, and I find it hard to believe that this solid ancient rock is the doorway to a vast cavern. But Dr. Baylor is hopeful. April 15th. The breakthrough came at 11:40, and if no further discoveries emerge from our exploration of Kashar, this alone will assure our expedition a place in geological history. The Cave of Kashar has opened its ancient door for us, revealing the threshold of a vast cavern whose mysteries seem endless. It came during the excavation of the fourth trench, a chalk-choked hole that had us all coughing and cursing and almost ready to abandon the search. It was Cook Yarborough who first detected the faintly hollow sound of the inner wall. He worked it furiously with his pick, exhibiting a physical strength that surprised me. I ordered the natives to join him, and within 2 hours, when the white dust had cleared, we stepped through into a stone chamber that echoed and re-echoed our surprised shouts of triumph and excitement. Cook Yarborough, exhausted by his efforts, was ordered outside into the open air, and the doctor and I took the first tentative steps into the interior of the cavern. Our lanterns gave us only a hint of the vastness ahead of us, and we know that it will take days and even weeks to explore the entire cavern. Tomorrow, we go inside. Later, we celebrated tonight and have named the cavern Sesame. April 16th. I'm writing this in the bowels of Sesame itself, my page lit by the lantern at my side. The place I am in now is like a high-domed palace room with giant stalactites hanging from the ceiling like crystal chandeliers. Dr. Baylor and Cook Yarborough are already asleep, bundled into their blankets on the hard, gritty floor. The strange, sweet, dusty smell is still strong in the air about us, as it has been since we first entered this section of the cavern. We made our entrance at 7 a.m., leaving the 3 remaining members of our party to guard the jeeps and equipment on the mountain path below. We had wished for only one guard, thinking to take the other 2 men inside, but they were adamant in their refusal. I argued bitterly with them, but their stubbornness was rooted in both superstition and practical fear. Perhaps I can't blame them. Who could be sure that our cavern roof wouldn't collapse in mid-exploration, or that it wouldn't contain noxious gases that would kill us? As a matter of fact, the musty, ancient odor that filled many of the chambers was enough to give us all doubts as to the safety of our venture, and it was only after Dr. Baylor tested the air chemically that we dared to walk inside. We have walked for almost a mile, through a multitude of intersecting passages that are like the street plan of an ancient stone city. There has been no time to search for fossils. We're too busy in pure exploration. After the 4th hour in the interior, we debated whether we should return to the cave mouth and continue the exploration the next day. It was Dr. Baylor who suggested that we spend the night here and continue in the morning. The bedroom we chose would do honor to a Stone Age emperor, but I find it difficult to sleep. What further mystery will we uncover upon awakening? April 17th. I must record this now, in this place, at this hour. The thing we have found is so commonplace and yet so terrible that I think it may drive Dr. Baylor into insanity. We have no explanation, no theory, no answer for it, but as I look at the object in Cook Yarborough's hand and hear his quiet, mirthless chuckle and see the doctor's ash-white face, I know that horror can come in the strangest and most ordinary forms. The discovery came but 1 hour after we awakened from our deep sleep in the high-domed room of the cavern. Just before weariness overcame us, we had broken through a thin limestone wall that seemed to contain some bone fragments. After awakening, we returned to the wall and crawled through the aperture we had created to find ourselves in a magnificent carved chamber whose roof rose an incredible height, the giant stalactites glistening like dripping diamonds overhead. But this awesome sight wasn't nearly as compelling as the half-buried object that faced us on the dusty floor. It was a human skeleton. The doctor gave an excited cry at the sight of it, and Cook Yarborough joined him in unearthing the fossilized bones. There was no doubt about its antiquity. Even without archaeological training, I had seen enough human remains to know that the skeleton we had uncovered was many thousands of years old. For centuries it had lain in its splendid mausoleum, waiting for its discoverers. "A human skeleton," the doctor breathed, "and in a wonderful state of preservation." "It's this dry air and ground," Cook Yarborough suggested. "How old would you say it was, Doctor?" "Thousands of years. Tens of thousands," Dr. Baylor said gleefully. "There may be many more such in the cavern. This may have been an underground dwelling place of prehistoric times. Who can say?" The petrified skull grinned at us. "Here's something else," Cook Yarborough said, lifting what appeared to be a brown stone from the earth beside the skeleton. "Strange shape, isn't it?" The doctor took it from his hand. "What do you make of it?" I came to Dr. Baylor's side. He shrugged and took a chisel from his canvas belt. He kneeled on the ground and began to chip it carefully until the encrusted layers of earth and rust were removed. It took some moments to understand what the object was, and even more moments to believe that we were seeing what we were seeing. It was a cigarette lighter. April 19th. This is my last entry. I hope this journal will be discovered someday, and our remains treated courteously by those who find them. We left Sesame 6 hours after our discovery of the cigarette lighter and its fossilized owner. By the time we reached the cave mouth, we were no longer on speaking terms. None of us had an explanation for our discovery. There was no possible way for the object to have been where it was. Then, at one point, Dr. Baylor fell upon Cook Yarborough with an unholy shriek, accusing his companion of playing a ghastly trick on him. It was the Englishman, after all, who had first picked up the object from the stone floor. The doctor, unable to find an explanation for its presence, had decided that Cook Yarborough was playing a grisly game. I separated them in time to prevent any violence, but found myself accusing the Englishman as well. He denied it vehemently, and his passionate argument was convincing. It was no prank. We had found a cigarette lighter that had lain in an unexplored cavern for many thousands of years, and that was the simple, inexplicable fact. It was dusk by the time we found the cave mouth and came out into the open air. The world seemed unnaturally quiet as we emerged, and the air was cooler than we had remembered it from the previous evenings. Slowly we made our way down the face of the mountain towards the path where our jeeps and their 3 guards waited. The path was empty. At first the explanation seemed simple. Either we had been betrayed and robbed by the Afghans, or else they had become concerned by our overnight absence and gone back to the nearest village to locate help. I chose the latter explanation, believing in the honesty of our workers. The doctor chose the first and began cursing. "It's no good wondering about it," Cook Yarborough said curtly. "We've got to use our heads and get out of here. We'll die of thirst or hunger if we don't find a village before too long. It's a good 15 miles to the nearest one," I said. "Quite a trek. I think we should wait here for a bit." "No," the doctor grumbled. "Cook Yarborough's right. They've turned tail on us. It's the only explanation. We'll have to go on foot." We started down the path, heading for the plain below. Night was falling rapidly, the first stars already beginning to blink in the darkening sky. It took us well over an hour to reach level ground, and in the darkness the crude road that led us back to the main highways seemed strange and unfamiliar. We felt the first touch of panic, but none of us were willing to display it to the others. We began to walk. "There may be cars along any minute," Cook Yarborough said. "Cars or wagons or something. We'll be all right." "The roads are so empty," Dr. Baylor muttered. I've never known it so empty. There seems to be nothing at all for miles. We've got to be sure of our direction, I said. It's too bad we didn't bring a compass. There's one in the Jeep, the Englishman said dryly. But we could try the stars. I searched the sky until I found the bright glitter of the North Star. Dr. Baylor looked heavenward, too, and his feet slowed to a halt. "What is it?" Cook Yarborough said harshly. "We don't have time for stargazing, Doctor." But he remained rooted, staring, his mouth opening and the lips moving. We watched him for a while, and then I put my hand on his arm. "Doctor," I said quietly, but he didn't seem to hear me. Cook Yarborough cursed and threatened to go on without us, but then he too stopped and waited to learn what had frozen the doctor in his path. Again I tugged at the thin arm, and Dr. Baylor slowly lowered his gaze to meet mine. His expression shocked me. His eyes were vacant and staring, and his mouth slack as the mouth of an imbecile. "What is it?" I said. "What's wrong, Doctor?" "The stars." I looked at them. "The stars are different," he said hoarsely. "The constellations." Cook Yarborough snorted. "What kind of nonsense is that?" "Different," the doctor muttered. "All different." "How?" I said. "How could they be different?" "They've changed. The constellations are out of place. They've altered." He looked at me with more intelligence in his eyes, but his mouth was now smiling foolishly. "Well, that's the answer, then," he said calmly. "That's what it is, of course." "What is?" "Time," he said. "Time has altered them, don't you see?" He turned towards the Englishman, still smiling. "That explains everything, don't you see? It's no longer 1960. 1960 is dead. 1960 is gone." "What are you talking about?" "It would take thousands of years to change the stars this way. Tens of thousands. We've named the cavern wrongly, Todd. Don't you understand? We should have called it Rip Van Winkle." He laughed. He laughed so hard that he staggered and almost fell, the tears streaming down his ruddy cheeks. I caught him in time and had the presence of mind to slap his face before he dissolved into hysteria. Then he was quiet. "So, now we know. The strange, sweet, dusty smell of our cavern bedroom had been some underground gas, some incredible vapor with powers not of annihilation but of preservation. The night we had spent in sleep had been a night 10,000 years long, a night in which we lay in suspended animation until the strange vapor had dissipated through the openings we ourselves had created. In the morning, we had awakened to find the remains not of prehistoric man, but the skeleton of a man of our own time, perhaps a rescuer seeking our bodies, a rescuer who had been felled by what force we would never know, a fallen rock, a seizure of the heart, and in his fall had lost the artifact of his time, a cigarette lighter. Now we are in the world of tomorrow, helpless and alone on a road that leads endlessly through wasteland. We have tired of walking. Our throats are dry as the dust at our feet, and our limbs refuse movement. Somewhere beyond us lies the cities and the people of the future, but we can never reach them. The greatest of discoveries, undiscovered. You've been listening to pre-1990s speculative fiction readings with a highlight on science fiction by Darrell T. Smith II. please consider clicking the donation link in the description box. Thank you so much for your time and your imagination.